And here her trafficker had always kept her in the basement with the lights off. And she didn't have the agency to leave, to turn the lights on. And so she lived in this dark fear. And then it became this fear of darkness.
Mhm.
And so for us, it was such like a drastic thing and such a transformative thing that she started out where she couldn't sleep with the lights off to where she went through our program. And that's where it's so key to understand what trauma does to us. And I think that's something we should maybe unpack a little.
The content presented in this podcast and YouTube show is for informational and entertainment purposes only. It is not intended to be a substitute for professional medical advice, diagnosis, or treatment. Always seek the guidance of your physician or other qualified healthcare provider with any questions you may have regarding your health or a medical condition. Never disregard professional medical advice or delay in seeking it because of something you have heard or seen on this show. If you think you may have a medical emergency, call your doctor or emergency services immediately. The host, guest, and producers of this show are not responsible for any adverse effects resulting from your use of or reliance on any information presented.
Andrea, can you hear us?
Many years ago, I died for 26 seconds. There are so many people in this world that have experienced life events that have led to their soul purpose. Wake Up Your Soul with Andrea will bring you these significant life events that demonstrate how to use those moments for guidance and life purpose. These are our stories. Hi, everyone, and welcome back to Wake Up Your Soul. Today's guest is Dan Emr, and he is the founder of Worthwhile, and he's going to talk to us about how he helps trafficking victims get back on their feet. Let's welcome Dan. But first, let me let you listen to my total mess up on the intro of this one, just because Dan thought it was so funny and being a real human. So I'm going to let you listen to my first take on the intro. Hi, everyone, and welcome back to Wake Up Your Soul. Today's guest is Dan Emr, and he's going to talk to us all about trafficking. He is the founder of Worthwhile, and he's going to talk to us about how he helps trafficking victims get back on their feet. Let's welcome Dan. Hi, Dan. How are you?
Hey, I'm doing well. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm excited to have you here and to have this conversation because I feel like right now on social media, there's a lot of talk. Obviously, we know with Epstein and all those things, there's a lot of talk and conversation about people being trafficked and being victims, but there's not a lot of conversations about what can you do to help the victims. It's this happened to so and so, and this was a victim, this person was a victim, and it just goes on, but we're never hearing, at least maybe my algorithm is not trained properly, but I feel like I'm not seeing a lot of stories being shared about what can we do to stop the problem and help the problem after it's already happened. So I think this episode will be worthwhile for that reason.
Yeah. Yeah. I like how you worked that in there too. Worthwhile. Yeah. And so, yeah, I appreciate that. And the other thing too, when you started, you said you're working to help traffickers get back on the feet. Just to clarify, survivors of trafficking were looking to get back on the feet.
Oh my
And
gosh, Dan, that sounds
I know it's
terrible.
what you meant. No, no.
Oh my gosh.
And I
Yes.
know your
Okay.
listeners know what you meant. But listen, this is where it's beautiful. We get to be human. You know, we misstep, we misspeak, but
No,
um,
I really should redo that.
I think you're good. You can always redo it later. Either
Yeah.
way.
This episode is absolutely to help trafficking
Survivors.
victims.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Trafficking victims get back on
We are
their
trying to get traffickers behind bars, not get back on their feet.
No.
That's it, honestly too. And this so often people go like, "You work in trafficking, right?" I'm like, "No, no, no, I work in anti-trafficking." So
Oh my gosh.
to,
I'm
to your
tired.
point, I mean, I think it's this is a great way to start. I think any podcast, being human, and when we
Step
are,
up. Yeah.
yes. So, do you want me to answer the question, or should we restart? What do you want to do? You tell me. I think people will get a kick out of you.
People get a kick out of how stupid you are. Yes, they will. Uh, it doesn't happen often, so I'll let it ride, I guess.
All right, all right. Well,
Well,
so going back to your question, you said your algorithm's broken. And the reality is, I don't think your algorithm's broken because it's what we see is the majority of this is like, this is a big issue. And it's one that is talked about because it's a human rights issue. People are really compelled by that. But what you don't see, and this is what you point out, is like you don't see the other side of it. Like, why is it happening? Right. And then what are we doing to help those that have been affected? So like I appreciate you giving audience to this opportunity to share about it because it's something that is happening far and wide and people just aren't aware of it. They think it's just an over there issue. They think it's just somewhere overseas. And it is, but it's happening here where you and I live.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. What do you think is the number one thing that people get wrong about trafficking as far as assumptions that they make? What is that number one thing that people are just very unaware of?
Yeah, I think the first, I'll be honest, like, we're being human here, right? When I started this work, like I quit my career job to start this. And I thought trafficking was just an overseas issue or predominantly an overseas issue. And any trafficking that was happening was like in that movie Taken with Liam Neeson. Now,
I
I
love that
know
movie
Liam
though.
Neeson. He's a great movie, great story, but it's not real, right? And so in my mind, it was like, this is how I'm going to help. And so when I started Worthwhile, I first started in India because that's where there's a lot of need and there is. But then I started to understand, oh, this is like here where we live and understanding what trafficking really is. And so when we started doing this work and I was working with different organizations, different groups, different, and I'm talking about like recovery centers, homeless shelters, domestic violence shelters. And I'm saying these are indicators of trafficking. I'm getting these wide eyed stares back saying, oh my goodness, that's who we're serving here. So one of the biggest misconceptions is that it's an over there issue, which it is, but it's also a here issue here in the US. And again, the fact that you're shedding a light on it is so important because so many people need to understand like we need help here. We need individuals that are here that need help and need to be served and cared for.
Yeah. For the record, I am Liam Neeson in the movie Taken. Like, if anybody were to take my child, that is me. In my mind, that is me.
I'm with you. I have two kids. My daughter is 15. I'm like, man, like don't stand between me and my daughter. But our work, one of the things that I shared with people is like, we're not, the role of kicking down doors. We get law enforcement involved as much as I think Liam Neeson's awesome. He and I don't have much in common other than we're both guys. But other than that, I mean, he's got a good head of hair. I have a very cleanly shaven head and he's much cooler. The way he talks is so much cooler. So I don't
Yeah.
have much on him. So
I mean, he could say almost anything and just sound like a badass. So
yeah.
lucky him.
Yeah.
So, okay, Dan, how did you get started in all this? So, what is the backstory on why you decided to dive into this? And I will say briefly that it's kind of been on my heart too. And connecting with you, I was like, I don't even know if this episode is so called for in my podcast. I mean, I think it is, but my other thought was like, I feel very meant to connect with you because this has been something that's been very much on my heart. And I've talked to people about it saying, I want to do something about it and I want to help. And I've had friends say, well, good for you. Like, you should if you can, because I could never do that. And I never really thought about that or realized, but there's so many people that just feel like they cannot even be a part of this, probably don't even want to listen to this episode. It's such a topic that is disturbing for parents, and I get that, but for me, it's something that just angers me to I don't know, to every level imaginable, and it makes me wanna be involved, but I can understand where for other people, it's too much for them. But for you, what made you get involved?
Yeah. Well, you touched on a couple of things there, and I want to address later on about how people can get involved because I feel like not everyone maybe is equipped or ready, but there are ways you can get involved. But for me, how I got involved is well, I wasn't seeking it out. Number one, I was going down that career path. We're kind of told that American dream, like go out, make lots of money, and you'll be happy, right? Buy lots of stuff, you'll be happy. And so I was kind of going down that path. I had a career job working for an engineering firm. I was in my early mid 20s. My wife and I were married. We had two young kids. My son was 5 at the time. My daughter was 2. And so that job afforded us a nice house in Pennsylvania. We had another house in Florida. And so I was kind of like pursuing that American dream. And then what happened is essentially what your podcast is called, Wake Up Your Soul, right? My soul was awoken to this idea, this understanding that people were being trafficked, that people were being sold as if they were a product or a commodity.
Yeah.
And it was one of those things I wasn't seeking this out. And so when I heard that, it resonated so deeply. And I heard about it from a young couple that was doing this work in Cambodia. And they were servant survivors. And I'm just sitting there like listening to them, like, wait, what? I'm like, like slavery is still happening. And it actually awoken my soul in the sense it took me back, like a rewound the tape to 10th grade because I remember sitting into my history class and our, history teacher asked kind of like just a question just to get the class to participate. He goes, who here, if you were alive when slavery was in America, would you have done something? Would you have even cared to do anything?
Hmm.
And 10th grader Dan, I raised my hand. I'm like, yeah, I would do something. He's like, well, why? I'm like, because everybody deserves to be free and deserves to be treated with dignity. And so now fast forward years later, that same 10th grader Dan, it was like awoken again. And I'm like, well, then what am I going to do? And so I spent a lot of time deliberating that. I mean, you can only imagine, like when I came home after about 2 years of really trying to figure out what should I do, I came home to tell my wife, like, hey, hon, great career move. I quit my job. And so it was a life shift. And it was one of those things that was not an easy one. Like sometimes people think like they hear the story now. This is 14 years ago, 2012, we started this.
Hmm.
But this couple of first years, it was really, really hard. Like, because it was, cashed in everything, pursued this. But what I will say is like, I never looked back and regretted it. And that where like I've seen so much where like we talked about awakening the soul. I see so much value in when you invest in people, the get back, the return far exceeds what you could ever imagine, far exceeds whatever money could buy. And so I don't regret it. And that's kind of how I got into it, just hearing this and feeling called to do something more.
Hmm. Yeah. I mean, I can relate to that too. And for me, I don't know where I'm gonna go with any of it, but the trafficking stuff has been like, I don't know, slowly just it keeps creeping into my life in some way or another as if it's like a sign. I mean, this started many months ago where it just became more prominent, but I actually went to this business which had nothing to do with it was like a wellness place and they were selling candles and the profits were going to trafficking victims. And I was like, that is so weird. Like, I mean, you don't see that every day, but it's something that just keeps creeping into my life in certain ways. So I'm happy to connect and I'm happy to be sharing this information with people because I think people have a lot of misconceptions too about trafficking. I think people think that these girls, some people think they chose it or that they just, I don't know, were too
Well,
weak and go ahead.
let's talk about that. I mean, so those ideas, right? And I don't really fault people if they had those wrong misconceptions. I don't fault them because you're not always given the right information.
Yeah.
And so, what I want to clarify too is like when you talk to individuals that have been forced into trafficking, and I'll even say forced into prostitution,
I
because
Dan, too, just as you go into this,
yeah,
I'm gonna share that my own thought not that I ever blame them by any means, but my own thought has been, if I was in that situation, like, you could never manipulate me, like, I'm so headstrong, right? And I have that belief, but I also believe that's probably very wrong. I you know, I think it's probably very naive, so I go ahead and touch on that.
yeah, yeah. No, and I think that's where, again, I'm saying I'm not faulting you because we have these ideas of how we think we'd react or how this came about. And so when we talk about like sometimes we will say like, hey, it was a choice, right? The reality is that so we've served thousands of survivors of trafficking at Worthwhile. The vast majority, so it's about 92%. If you ask the question of 92% of people being prostituted, you approach someone that's selling themselves, they're being sold for sex, 92% and say, I want out of this. I don't want to be here. That's the vast majority. So leave space for those few that maybe are like, this is what I want. This is a very small margin
Yeah.
and number. And the way it happens too, again, going back to clarifying the misconception, is that idea of like, um, well, they chose it or they were kidnapped from overseas. The vast majority here in the US, they are US citizens being trafficked and exploited by other US citizens. The
Mhm.
individuals that we serve, the vast majority, well, not the vast majority, but the majority, about 57%, it's familial trafficking. So imagine the level of trauma when a family member, someone that you're supposed to be able to trust, in turn sells you to someone else to be raped.
Well, and that's probably where the confusion comes in for the victims, right? It is somebody that they trust that puts them into that circle, and we know what we know, right? Especially as children, and they may not know that that's not normal and that's not right and that's not supposed to be happening. Is that kind of accurate?
Yeah, I mean, if you talk to individuals much like we're working with, the way it began is because they were with someone, a family member who you should trust, and so by the time they recognize that what's happening is wrong, it's already happened, and it may have happened multiple times. And
How
so,
what can you kinda I think we're also in the dark on this. How you're saying by the time it happens. So what happens before by the time, By the time it happens, there's been a lot of things happening, right? What are those things that have been happening?
Yeah. Well, a lot of times what we'll see is, like I said, 57% it's familial trafficking. You have the other 40 some percent is happening by manipulation. And so what it looks like, so how does someone end up in this? And we'll get to the answer in that part of it, like why did they leave it? But how do they get into it is because there's a lot of this playing on the vulnerabilities of individuals.
Mhm.
So one of the things we'll see is just individuals looking for acceptance, looking for love. And so traffickers will prey upon that. So social media has blown this up because you can go on, you can see someone's bio, their profile, what do they like? And you just jump on, DM them like, oh, I like that same band. I like that same TV show. And you have this instant connection and you start to build relationship. And this is like a vast majority, so many individuals that we've served will share like, yeah, it started with a boyfriend. And then he's like, well, I can't afford to give you the things I want to give you. Can you go do this thing one time? And this guy will give us some money, and then it happens again and again and again. And they're now being trafficked by this individual. So by the time they recognize, like, oh my goodness, this guy is just a pimp selling me. So there's that. And then you also have the youth side where so much that we see with individuals that we're serving, their stories started at an early age in the sense that they were abused. And this is what's so heartbreaking is you have kids, that are being abused sexually, and it opens up this vulnerability for further exploitation. And so traffickers, we've had conversations, we've done studies, read on, a lot of the traffickers that will say they almost feel like they have a radar for those individuals that have this hurt, this from a childhood abuse, and they're drawn to that. And so those traffickers will then prey upon that individual who has this vulnerability that was started at an early age. And
Mhm.
so that's kind of how it begins. It's false relationships, seeking out those that are hurting, looking for acceptance and love, those that are hurting and don't feel like they deserve love or don't deserve to be treated with dignity and respect. And then they're exploited and abused. And that's where we find them. That's where we start to help them.
That's horrible. Dan, as parents, how do we assess vulnerability in our kids?
Yeah. I remember one of the things that always resonated with me was a woman. She's now a woman. She's a friend and a survivor of trafficking. And she was being sold by her neighbor, a male neighbor, at 8 years old. And part of that was like, why didn't she just say, well, she's an 8 year old kid. And she said, she goes, Dan, if I just talked to my mom, I feel like it would have stopped. Or if my mom just asked me questions, I feel like it would have stopped.
Mhm.
And so me being in this work since my daughter was 2 until now she's 15, about to turn 16, I've made that a priority, number one. So have conversations, make sure that you have a relationship. So your kid feels that they can safely talk to you regardless of what it is. And
Mhm.
so I always make sure that my kids, I'm like, listen, you can always talk to me. Never, ever, ever feel like you can't talk to me.
Yeah.
That's the first thing. So if you start to have kids that, number one, they feel like they don't have that relationship, that's an at risk use. If they feel like they just, are alone and you see your kids, sometimes one of the things you'll look for, you'll see is like a shift in how things have been to what they are now. Now, adolescence and going from a kid to a teen, that can affect some of that. So be mindful of that. But the reality is you also at times see kids, I was working with a school in Philadelphia. They reached out to me. They said, we think we have a trafficking situation going on. So I called in the FBI. And so what indicated that, so this is that answering, like, what do parents look for? What do teachers look for? Is this kid, their schedule started shifting in that they came into school exhausted
Mhm.
always. Well, why do you think they're tired? We know now. Well, because they're being sold for sex at night.
Mhm.
They came in, they also were having jewelry and shoes and stuff they couldn't afford. Well,
Mhm.
how can they afford that? The family couldn't figure it out. Well, now we know it's
Mhm.
because they're getting this money from their pimp to put on these things. And so those are things you can indicate. And then just being able to have that like open dialogue that we talk about, having that relationship where you can say, hey, as your parent, what's going on social media? Can we have some visibility on that? Because that's where traffickers really try to separate. They really try to put a wedge between kids and their parents so that they don't have this communication. Because
Yeah.
as soon as a parent steps in, they know the game's up and they got to move on to the next. So
Mhm.
those type of things you can look for and be mindful of, and things you try to incorporate into your family structure.
Yeah. Something I've talked about it on a recent episode that I had not really thought about until having conversations with people and other people sharing things on Instagram, but how important it is. And I'm so guilty of doing this because my husband and I are both guilty, but we've talked about it and it's over with and it's done. But we would jokingly say, because we have 2 little girls, so we jokingly say, if anybody messes with you, like, they're gonna be real sorry, you know? And we now realize from talking with other people, that is actually a really bad setup because then your kid thinks that if they share something that somebody bad did, you're going to go and hurt this person. And then you might end up in jail. And then their problem is going to feel even bigger. And I realized how true this was in one of my episodes way back. The woman was talking about how she was abused sexually by the neighbor boy. And I said, "Well, did you tell your mom?" And she said, "Well, no, because her mom was an alcoholic and she was so scared that her mom would go and kill this boy, and then her mom would be in jail, and then that's a whole 'nother set of problems, right? And so I think we don't realize as parents when we jokingly tell our kids that we're gonna handle it and we're gonna kick somebody's butt if they even try to mess with you, that actually sets us up in a really bad way, and I had never thought about that.
Yeah.
So that's definitely a change I've made.
And there's one more thing I want to share with that too, because one of the things we do at Worthwhile is we speak in schools. And so we do this on a national level and we do it through this initiative called Words of Worth. And one of the things I do in speaking with students, especially, and this is for them to think about, is we talk about a bunch of different things and words that have worth and value. But one of the things I key in on is this idea of being brave. And what does that look like? And so being brave means doing in spite of being fearful. And being brave, it means speaking up when something has happened. And one of the things we'd lead them to in that discussion with the students is like, we've all heard this expression, stranger danger. It's kind of old school. It makes sense. But the reality is, it's not necessarily that. It's more strange behavior danger. Because
Yeah.
now, strange behavior danger, that encapsulates a larger and broader audience. That includes even family members or a
Mhm.
neighborhood boy. And it's this idea that if someone's making you feel unsafe and their behavior is strange, be brave to speak up. And so that's what we, from the kids' side, something we encourage them to be mindful of and to learn about.
Yeah. Well, and that is reminding me of this topic of no touch zones, telling your kid that this is a no touch zone. And then it's like, you know what? The reality is your whole body is a no touch zone. Your whole body should not be touched. We don't want to tell our kids that, our privates are no touch zones because grooming doesn't usually start straight for the privates, right?
Yeah.
And God, I hate conversations like this, but I know they're so needed, but it grosses me out to even like talk about this stuff. But that is how the grooming starts, right? It's not like they just go straight for the privates, right? It's slowly just, rubbing a kid's shoulder or their
Yeah.
cheeks or whatever, right? And eventually it's like you get that kid essentially comfortable with the physical touch from that person and we all know where I'm going with this. I don't even want to say I don't want to
Yeah.
keep going. It's so awful. It's so awful. But I think it's an important thing to talk about because I think people think about that when they tell their kids, it's like, and privates are our privates. And no, our whole body, it's our body. And that's the most important thing we can teach our kids is our body
Yeah.
is our body.
And I think to add to that is helping your kids understand that there's power behind their voice. So that's again something we teach in the school, being that you are heard. And
Mhm.
so I've said that to, I have two kids. My son is 19 now. So he's I would say he's he's a big guy. He can handle himself. My daughter, I still have those conversations, but like it's always been from when they're little to now is
Mhm.
when you say no or when you say stop, and that's, to your brother, to your sister, or even if dad's messing with you, we're playing around, you say, stop, I need to stop. Your voice needs to matter. And so
Mhm.
that's something that we make sure that our kids know, that kids in school understand. Like, if you don't have the ability to say no or stop and have it happen that way, then you're not in a safe space.
Right.
Or you have people that need to be educated. And I think too, I think parents, sometimes and I know it sounds, you're like, I don't want to talk about it. It can be awkward, but there's so much value and power to giving voice to this and not shying away from it. Just saying, we're going to meet this head on and we're going to talk about it because it's important. So I've had those same conversations with my own kids and they're awkward, but I'm like, listen, we need to just do this because you're of an age that I want you to be safe. You have awareness. And so we're going to use that awareness for your safety, to your
Mhm.
benefit, to stay safe.
Yeah, I think that's a very powerful thing to talk about, asking your kids what makes you feel safe, and helping them to understand that, oh, when somebody listens to me, I feel safe. When somebody respects me saying no or stop, I feel safe. And my kids are horrible with that, with each other, but they get so mad, if somebody outside of their sibling is messing with them and not stopping, but the two of them, they'll go at it.
Yeah.
But that's one of those parenting things we're working on is trying. And I feel like I'm a broken record lately. Actually, that's been a very common one. I'm like, no means no. She said stop. You need to stop.
Yeah.
But, pushing boundaries, those are children for you. Dan, do you have a story where there was a trafficking victim where it just seemed like it was going to be impossible to help them? And then you miraculously or somehow they were helped and saved? Because I want to hear what made it possible.
Yeah. It's funny how you frame that and phrase that. I've shared this with so many people. I said, there are so many times that I'm so glad that I'm wrong. And what I mean by that is we've had individuals come into our programs and they start going through our housing program, or they're in our outreach program, or they're in our employment program. And I'm observing, right? And I'm hearing, and I will say early on, I'm like, there's no way we can help them. Like their trauma, their hurt is too deep, right? And I've been wrong, thankfully, so many times. And I think about like individuals. Here's Tammy. I remember she came into our housing programs, and it was so hard to maximize the use of the home. We have two individuals staying in one bedroom. At times when we can do one per bedroom, we do that. But in this case, we needed to put two in one bedroom. And the new roommate's like, I can't. She never turns the lights off. And we're like, why? We got to turn the lights off. Like at night, you're not sitting. No, they're always on. And so her story began to unfold as she was going through her trauma and her healing with our counseling team and working. And here, her trafficker had always kept her in the basement with the lights off. And she didn't have the agency to leave, to turn the lights on. And so she lived in this dark fear. And then it became this fear of darkness.
Mhm.
And so for us, it was such like a drastic thing and such a transformative thing that she started out where she couldn't sleep with the lights off to where she went through our program. And that's where it's so key to understand what trauma does to us. And I think that's something we should maybe unpack a little bit. She was
Yeah.
able to come out of that and to heal. I feel like another one was
But before
Nicole.
we go into another one,
Yeah.
what made it possible for Tammy to heal?
Yeah. So for that, one of the key things, and this is where and I love all of there's so many agencies out doing wonderful work, providing homeless shelters, providing drug and alcohol recovery, all these type of things. But they're addressing more or less the more visible kind of surface level thing that's there because of a deeper trauma.
Mhm.
And so Tammy's recovery, her healing is because of one of the things that we key in on at Worthwhile is we make sure we address the trauma. We need to unpack
Mhm.
the trauma because if it's never resolved and it's never first identified and then worked on, you start to find yourself in this cyclical pattern. And so oftentimes, like we work with individuals and they adapt all these maladaptive behaviors because they're trying to numb the pain, they're trying to forget, and so they get in these habits and they just keep repeating and the only way you can break that cycle is if you have good people in your life and you're willing to address the trauma and work on it. And so
Mhm.
that's what we make as part of our programs that we always incorporate those good people. And I ask individual survivors all the time, like, what was a key element that helped you in one of those good moments in your life? And they always say people. And then I said, why do you think you went back? And like, I don't know. It's like, have you ever addressed your trauma? I'm like, no. Like, well, let's do that part. Let's give you good people and address the trauma. And so for Tammy, that was it. For Nicole, she was one that shared her story with us at her graduation. So she graduated from her housing program. She's like, I remember when I was in the Poconos, which is like the mountainous region of Pennsylvania. She's like, I was in the Poconos. I was on the streets with nothing but the clothes on my back. I'd left my trafficker. I was done being sold and it was raining. And she's like, I looked at the skies and said, bro, help me. And I love that because to her, bro was God. I'm like, I don't know many people that call him bro. So her version of God help me was bro help me. She's like, then I got into this recovery program, which referred us to the Worth It program, which is our outreach program that is a broad reaching outreach program. And it helps individuals start to address traumas they've experienced, connects them to resources, and that she moved into our housing program. At her graduation, I remember sitting, her dad and mom were there. And her dad, he just was this tough guy. He was quiet, but he was kind.
Mhm.
And he stands up and he just says, "Thank you" to us in the room. And he starts weeping
Aw.
and he hugs his daughter, Nicole, and he's hugging her and he's hugging her and he's hugging her. He's so proud of from where she was to being on the streets to nothing in the rain saying, "Bro, help me," to now 2 years later in his arms and is weeping. And he says, "I never thought we'd have our daughter back." And so that was a two-part healing. There was one for them to be reunited, to be connected. And it was another for her to address that trauma, to be
Yeah.
able to heal and to be able to reconnect with good people. And so that's one of the things I love to share is like we need to understand what trauma does to us. But
Yeah.
what I love is that we get to share that there is healing and there's hope in that,
Mhm.
that there's healing.
Mhm. Absolutely. Do you wanna dive into that more? The trauma and how we end up there, and what are some of the typical traumas that people go through that make them more susceptible? I know we kinda touched on that in the beginning, but do you have more that you wanted to
Yeah.
pack there?
Yeah, I feel like, and we don't have to spend tons of time on it, but I think it's just important to help people understand, like, if you don't address trauma, the reason you find yourselves in these situations, and maybe you have your listening audience is like, man, I find that I keep relapsing, right? I keep ending up with like, these horrible relationships.
Mhm.
And a lot of that stems from trauma because what trauma does is it does a couple ugly things. It's something that messes with our mind. And it's one of those where your body has a physiological response to it. And there's a great book called The Body Keeps the Score, and it talks about trauma and how trauma affects the body. And it's whether you recognize it or not, it oftentimes affects your health, but it also can affect this inner dialogue that you have.
Mhm.
And one of the things we did is we created a piece on our website. If you go to our website, our resource page on worthwhile.org, there's a piece called The Voice of Trauma. And the reason we created it and I work with the producer on that is because we wanted to help people understand when you have trauma, there's this dialogue. It's almost like this demon type that a voice that's inside that says, "You have no value.
Mhm.
You're useless." And anytime you start to see success, that voice is there. And so we have to be mindful of that. And so one of the things we do is by working through with counseling and stuff, we can help you never get rid of that voice, right? If you've ever experienced anyone listening that's ever experienced significant trauma, you won't unfortunately ever be rid of the voice, but you can quiet it and you can control it more.
Mhm.
And so we talk about that with our individuals that we serve. The other is that trauma tends to isolate. It tends to make us feel like we're alone.
Mhm.
And so we isolate or we then create self blame. And we say, well, I'm the reason this happened. And so those are things you have to learn as well, that that's not the case. Like there's
Mhm.
so many individuals that we've served. We call it like that light bulb moment as we're talking about trafficking and the ploys that traffickers, do that they're like, oh my goodness, that's what happened to me. We're like, yes. And then what happens with that is then you start to have a measure of grace for yourself. Be like, okay, I do deserve this. And so those are elements that we have to understand. And the way trauma can affect the mind too is like when your hippocampus is what's kind of like a filing cabinet, if you can envision that with memories. So as
Mhm.
you're going through your life, you're logging memories in this filing cabinet. Well, what the hippocampus also does is it generates cortisol. And that happens during those fight or flight moments and areas of significant trauma. And so when it's doing that, those memories being stored are not stored anymore. You're just producing this cortisol and adrenaline so you can get out of a dangerous situation. And so when we're working with survivors, so often their story is like fragmented, it's non-linear. You're like, and so we need to be mindful as we care for other individuals that we have that patience and understanding of how this trauma has come about and how it's affected them.
Mhm. So, going off of that, in what ways are we unknowingly contributing to this problem as a society?
To the problem of trafficking, how are we contributing to that?
And putting children in the mindset that's making them susceptible, in what ways are we contributing to this problem? Or I guess both ways, right? I mean, whichever way you see it, which ways are we contributing to the problem as a whole?
Yeah. Well, I think one of the ways that this happens is, we have a culture, and it's not just our culture, it's a pretty global kind of mindset of like, if you want something, go get it. Right. If you want to go have sex, go get it.
Mm.
Not even thinking or considering how this is affecting the individual, the person. And so when we look at like in our area in the US, the average age of a buyer, right? Someone that's looking to buy. Let me share the demographics. They're typically 49 years old. They
Oh,
make $159,000 a year. Almost 70% are married.
oh my god.
About 40% have a college degree, right? So they are individuals. They look like me. They're Caucasian too. They're predominantly 80% Caucasian. So there are people that look like me that are going out and saying, "Well, I want this, right? I want to go. I want to have a beer. I'll go buy a beer. I want to get
Yeah.
a car. I'll go buy a car. I want to go have sex. I'll go pay for sex." Well, no, it stops at the items because the person is not an item, right?
Mhm.
And so that mindset needs to shift. And we do a lot of work. We work with men as well. We work with men that have exploited others, and so there's just this lack of understanding because they think, well, they chose it. And this goes back to the very beginning of this. They didn't choose this. They were forced into, and you're furthering that exploitation. And so it starts there. And then the other part of it is this desensitization towards overly sexualized things. And so
Yeah.
our youth, yeah, they might think, well, why like it? Well, again, it's kind of this two-part thing is we have this culture of like, go after it if you like it. If you have kids like 8, 9 years old watching pornography and it becomes the norm and like, well, that's fine. I like this. I'm gonna just keep going after it. And then because they think it's a fun thing because they're on this side of a screen looking at it, watching it, they think it's great. So then they get exploited and lured into it because like, well, I liked watching it, so I'm going to do it. Well, no, you
Right.
don't want to be raped on a daily basis. So you have that side of this culture that's
Ah.
drugged in. And so the best thing I always share with people is like, if at any point you start to see a person as a commodity, you're in the wrong place, right?
Mm.
And so this phrase I think is such a powerful one. It's love people, use stuff, never the other way around,
Mhm.
right? We oftentimes love stuff and use people. And so that comes down to, that kind of distills it down to the simplest base level. What we do at Worthwhile is we love on people, like stuff, finances, those things help us accomplish our mission. As individuals, we need to love people and not pursue things as our priority or love things as our priority. And so that's where I think our culture a lot of times has it the wrong way around. They, like I shared at the beginning of this, like I was going down that path. I was pursuing stuff and buying stuff to seek out happiness. And that I can tell you wholeheartedly, after doing this for 14 years, that's not where happiness lies.
Mhm. This is so interesting talking about the if I want it, I can have it, or if I want it, I just have to go get it because I don't know, I wanna talk about that more because I do feel like that's very much my personality and not that I'm like some pedophile or anything, but that's very much my personality, like go-getter personality. If I want something, I'm not gonna ask somebody else to take care of my business. I'm gonna handle it and I'm gonna get it done. And I feel like that's a good thing to have within you and instilled in you to not rely on others to fix your problems and deal with your stuff. And if you want something in this life, I mean, you do have to be the one to go and get it. You can't just sit around and wait for somebody to fix things for you and do things for you. But I do understand what you're saying, how that also leads people into this feeling of it's almost like an entitlement though, right? Like if I want something, I can have it. I can have anything I want in this world. And that's not what I'm saying. And maybe you're also saying the same and there's a little bit of a difference of I want it, I can have it in terms of things. Like whatever I want, I'm just going to go get it and I can have it versus just a job. If I want the job, just gonna go get it, right? I'm gonna make sure I get it. I'm gonna put myself in the front of the line by doing XYZ or, I wanted to do a podcast. So, okay, I'm gonna do it. And I want it to rate well. So I'm gonna work my tail off. Like, and so maybe we're talking a little bit differently about
We're similar. And so let me clarify it then, because I think it's not wrong to pursue things. It's not wrong to be a go-getter, right? I would qualify myself as a go-getter. I go after stuff. The difference is, and I kind of summed it up in that quote of love people,
yeah.
use stuff, never the other way around, is when you over prioritize stuff. I'm in the process of editing a book right now I'm writing. It's called Wait Till the End. Your story is not finished. And it's this idea that so many survivors that I've worked with, right? And survivors that I've worked with that I've lost to suicide and overdose, they felt like their story was over, right? And we watch social media and we're kind of drawn in by that clickbait, right? It's like, wait till the end. You watch the thing that's like, why did I even watch that? These nothing.
I
I'm
can't get
talking,
those 5 seconds
yeah,
back.
yeah, exactly. But I'm talking about something else. So this
Yeah.
idea and the reason for this book was to help survivors or individuals that have experienced significant trauma, your listeners, right? That have experienced significant hurt. Sometimes we feel like it's just not worth waiting, right? I don't want to see how this story plays out. But I can tell you from time to time again that the story is still being written, right?
Mhm.
And so when we talk with individuals, and in the book, one of the chapters I talk about is the importance of people. And so this goes back to what you're just talking about. Is it wrong to go after stuff? Is it wrong to pursue stuff? If at any point in time your desire supersedes the value of another person, you've gone too far.
Mm.
Right. And so I have to be mindful of that. Even in starting a nonprofit, right? All good intentions. I was starting with the right reasons. I remember as I was doing this, number one, my wife didn't love the idea that I was quitting this good paying job with 2 young kids at home whom she was at home raising. At the same time, I had just quit my job. About a week later, she got diagnosed with type 1 diabetes. I was so laser focused on this priority, which was a worthy mission focused priority of helping other people out of trafficking and find healing, that the day she went to go find out if she had type 1 diabetes, she went by herself. And this is one of the biggest regrets I have. As much as I love the story that I can share, I've made missteps because I was so focused, even on something that sounded good to me, that I forgot to look out for that very important individual, my wife. And I let her go to this doctor appointment by herself to find out she had this chronic illness that was going to affect her for the rest of her life. If I had a rewind button, I'd press it 1,000 times to go back and say, honey, I'll go with you. I'll drive with you there. I'll sit with you there. Because as much as this mission and this priority, this go-getter thing that I'm going after is important, it's not more important than you. And so it goes back to that idea that it's okay to pursue things or want things, but it should never, ever over prioritize that thing over that person. And
Mhm.
so I always caution other people, be a go-getter, go after it. But if you start to wonder why you're miserable, it's probably because you started to put that priority on that thing over the people that are around you that are the nearest and dearest to you. And so if I could tell my younger self, I'd say, pause, Dan, slow down, focus on your wife. She needs you. And the same is for us. We all need to be hearing that sometimes. Like
Mhm.
it's okay to be a go-getter and go after stuff you want, but you'll pass by the really great things. There's a quote by C.S. Lewis in this book called Out of the Silent Planet. And in this book, this main character's name's Ransom. He goes to this foreign planet. It's like Mars or something. It's a sci-fi book. Bear with me. And he meets this like being, this alien being. And the alien being says to him, our people have a law never to speak of sizes or numbers to you because it makes you give reverence to the nothings and pass by what is really great.
Mhm.
And I think how much does our culture need to hear that? We are so focused, hyper focused on the clicks, the likes, the follows, and we
Mhm.
pass by what is really great, which is the people that make up our life. Whenever we share stories or memories, it's never about the thing that we bought. It's about the people we enjoyed it with.
Mhm.
And so that's how we keep those barriers, those parameters, I should say, when we go after things. You can still go after, but keep those parameters. And that's something that in turn would actually even limit trafficking because people would say, wow, I see the person that's being affected by this.
Yeah.
The buyers that would say, I see the person that I'm hurting.
Yeah. When you're saying all that, I'm thinking about just how selfish people have become. Is essentially kind of what you're saying, right? And I think if we could become more selfless, right, and care for others, we would be able to see people in a different way, just like you're saying, and not see them as an item or something to be hurt. And it's not even just in trafficking, though, that people are so selfish. Just in general, they're never thinking about others. How many people even hold the door open anymore? I feel like so. I moved to Texas like almost 5 years ago, and I see it a lot more here. But man, in California, you're going to get a door slammed in your. Sorry, I'm just saying. I'm from there, so I can say it. I feel like, but I don't see this. I don't want to bash on. I'm not bashing on the people, and I'm not bashing on the state. But I'm going to say, from having lived there and having lived here, culturally, it's different. And I get it though. Living in California is insanely expensive and people are struggling to survive. And when you're struggling to survive and you're in that fight or flight mode constantly, you just become very self centered because you have to, because you're in survival mode. And so people aren't able to even take the time to think about others, like holding the door open or helping somebody on the side of the road or whatever it be, right? It just, when I moved to Texas, I felt like everybody was trying to traffic my kid because people were like talking to me and so friendly with me and my kids. And I'm like, what are you doing? you know?
Yeah.
Because it didn't happen in California. My kids would try to wave at people and they would just look at him like, "What are you?" doing? This is weird.
Yeah.
And so I do think that people need to care more about others than themselves, but
Yeah. And
the
I
way
think,
we live attributes to that.
yeah, it's part of the culture. You think about culture where you're at, and this is, the reality is like in California, there might be more of a self-focused culture. Like you need to make it in Hollywood, you need to promote yourself. You need to get this stuff out there. You need to be an influencer in the wild, like you got to get out there. You got to grind it out so people notice you. Right. And maybe in Texas, you don't see quite as much of that because it's a culture of family. Right. And maybe it's a culture of like your community. And probably what you're describing is what you're feeling is you're seeing that lived out. And it's hard. It's hard for people to understand that. It's especially when you're in it, right? If you're in it, you don't necessarily see stuff. And so part of what your podcast is doing is trying to wake people up to this idea, waking up themselves, their soul to like, there's more out there. There's more
Yeah.
to what's happening in this world. And for me, that was like such a big thing is like, I grew up, people will say like, man, that's crazy. You sold everything. You sold your homes. You did this. I'm like, what? My parents did it. And I'm like, what? And yeah, like I grew up at 18 acres, I had dirt bikes, I had zip lines, I had a swimming pool. And my parents one day they came in, it's like family meeting, and they said, all this stuff's great, but we're selling it. And my dad worked for Prudential Financial. My mom was a nurse, and we sold everything. We went to Ukraine. I grew up as a kid in Ukraine from age 12 to 18. And I think back, like, how insane was that they did that? I mean, it was like if they had posed it to me now as an adult, like that's the dumbest thing you tell a kid that you're going to do. But I look back and I'm like, man, kudos to them. And I said that to them. I said, God, thank you. Like, because you not only you got me out of like this blinders, right? I'm living in this world that I don't see anything else but what's in front of me. And I become so self-absorbed. But then I got to see perspective, right? I got to see a different world. The majority of the world doesn't live like we do here. And I grew up on a mud street with a meat processing factory at the end of the street. And so on summer days, it did not smell pleasant. And just see how people live and yet we're grateful. And it just helped me understand. And so to your point of like, you've seen the difference between the cultures in those two areas between California and Texas. Again, not to fault your listeners if you're not aware of it because you're in it, but I would encourage you, go out to be part of a different community, to try different communities, to learn what it means to invest in other people, give to other people of your time. And that it's not always like you're going to get a thank you back, but we need to know that when we do that, it helps you heal too. And I
Mhm.
think a lot of people don't recognize that.
Mm.
Anytime you invest in people, you're going to do better than if you invest in yourself.
Yeah. You keep touching on the podcast and waking up your soul. And yeah, for listeners listening, that is the goal of this is to help people gain new perspectives. That's really what this is all about is just bringing all these different stories so that people can make shifts in their lives because we really can't shift until we have a new perspective. And so that's why I just bring on all these very different stories and people from around the world in different areas because you know what you know. And I mean, it's like for me, it was wild going from I lived my entire life in California, my entire life. I was born and raised there for over 30 years. And then I moved to Texas and I was like, wow, I can't believe I almost spent my entire life in one place. I said that so many times because I just couldn't believe it. I almost spent my entire life basically living in a bubble and in this shell of only knowing one tiny world. And we can learn so much by just listening to podcasts, right? And having conversations with people that we wouldn't ordinarily have conversations with. And I think it's important, but also you do you. But I think if you're listening, you're probably listening because you do think and wonder what else is out there for me. And that's what this is about is getting that new perspective and helping you chase that dream because I think for a lot of the listeners, you're probably like me where you just and even you, right? Where you felt like there's something more. There's something more I'm meant to do in this life. And so you quit your job and you went all in. And I think a lot of people feel that way. Like, is this it for me? Is this it for me? I think there's something else or something more for me.
Yeah. And I would challenge you on that no, not challenge, I would encourage you on that there is more, right?
Yeah.
And I think that's that idea of seeking out purpose, right? And again, going back to the book, Wait Till the End, one of the chapters is about finding your purpose. And sometimes we think it's like, it's told to us, or we're like, a divine light being comes down and said, this is your purpose. The reality is like, purpose isn't an object, right? It's not something that you can acquire. Purpose is achieved when it's done in conjunction with something. So think of a coat, right? A coat's purpose is to what? Keeps you
Keep
warm,
you
right?
warm.
Does it produce heat though? It doesn't.
Yeah.
A coat doesn't make heat, but it serves its purpose when it's put on you as a person. And so I think when we talk about anything that's created, it's a fork, it serves its purpose as a fork, unless it's in the hands of Ariel, then it's something else. But it serves a purpose when it's engaged with the human. And I truly believe if you ever want to find your purpose, engage with another person. And that's where you will find purpose. So like sometimes we find our purpose in our jobs or the acquiring of materials, but you're going to come up lacking. And so I encourage people wrap purpose into people. And then also I encourage people to create a personal mission statement. It keeps you focused. And so I'll speak to thousands of people a year and I'll say, how many of you have a personal mission statement? I've only had 2 people ever raise their hand. And it's just something we don't think about. But the reality is it keeps you on track. It keeps you focused on what is your priority. And so for me, I have a personal mission statement. It says, use the limited time I have to positively impact as many as possible
Mhm.
and help them understand their worth. And
Mhm.
so in every situation, if it's like I had someone run into me and wrecked my car, kid was a disaster. I could have been flaming mad at him. I said, listen, my priority is my mission focus, which is to make sure you're okay. And I'm going to positively impact you.
Mm.
And, these are things that we can do, we can put in place. And our culture, our world needs more people to be thinking of others and less of themselves. And that in turn affects this idea of people being exploited and trafficked and sold. And if we can instead shift towards others, we can not only help people that are coming out of that find healing, we can help others understand that they're affecting someone that has value and worth it to not even buy.
Yeah.
And so it all ties together. And I appreciate you making this as not option to share. I think it's valuable for your audience because they can have an impact. At the end of the day, you're left with the choice. You've heard this now. Now, do you do something about it or you do nothing? And
Mhm.
we'd love to engage you. At Worthwhile, we always say we want people to get involved. And that's some of our priorities. Give you an outlet to serve, to get involved, to help others find their value and worth through your services, through your time.
Yeah. Well, I love your example too of helping humanity and just talking about your mission. And my mission is very similar to yours. And I talk about all the time, but like, I just really want people to see the beauty of life and see that they can get through the hard and life can be a beautiful thing and they can love it because I think so many people are just in this rat race and they're not loving it. And I want people to gain a new perspective and love life. And you're right. We need to be there for humans and mankind more. And I actually have a story from yesterday, actually. I went in to get some imaging done of my spine, and I don't know why I'm sharing that information, it doesn't matter, but anyway. It's gonna be
Congratulations.
but anyway, so I was at it was a medical facility is the point of it, and there was a woman, which I don't know what was going on with her. A lot of people were kind of, like, judging her and like, "Oh my gosh," and I mean, certainly I was, like, thinking, "What is going on?" But I also my brain was like, "Is she okay? Is anybody taking care of this woman?" She walked up to the counter, and then she took her shoes off, and then she said she needed to go to her car, and so she left, and then they called me over to the counter, and I'm standing there, but I hadn't seen all that. I'm looking down, and the lady's just looking at me, nodding her head, and I'm like, "There's shoes here." She's like, "Yeah, I know." I was like, "Oh, okay." And then she's like the lady left, she had to go to her car and come back, and I'm thinking, "Who the heck takes their shoes off inside, goes outside to their car barefoot, and comes back?" But, okay, whatever. So, I'm filling out my paperwork, and then it's a little old lady. So, the little old lady comes back, she still doesn't put her shoes on. And she's standing next to me, and her paperwork was left there, and the woman working there seemed kind of annoyed by her behavior and the fact that she just left her paperwork there, she wasn't signing, and she said, "You need to sign this paperwork," and the lady's like, "Well, I need a pen." And then the lady seemed even more annoyed. I was like, "Well, here are the pens." They were, like, right in front of her, but whatever. And the lady just kept after she left, kept telling me, "Thank you for your patience, thank you so much, and, I know the privacy thing." I'm like, "I don't care." Like, I don't care if this lady watches me sign the same exact paperwork that she's signing. I do not care. But we've become so selfish that it's just everybody has to care so much about people being nosy or up in their business. And I'm like, that's not in my business. It's totally fine. But and a lot of people are just talking about the lady not having her shoes on. And I'm sitting there thinking, well, why do you not have your shoes on? Like, do you need help with something in your life? And I guess I could have asked, but I also didn't know how to ask that. 'Cause it was weird to me, but I was like, "Maybe it's not weird to her?" Like, maybe nothing's wrong at all, so how do I tell her, like, "I think something's wrong?" "Are you elderly?" And she is elderly, but it's like, "Do you need some sort of assistance?" Because that was the other thought is there's so many which we're not gonna go down this road right now, but there's so many, elderly people in this world that I think are just kind of, I don't know, lost in the shuffle of their age and nobody's really taking care of them. This reminds me of recently I saw this old man at the grocery store and he bought like, I kid you not, 10 bags of salad, like pre-mixed, like salad mix things, the same exact one. And his cart was just very minimal. I was like, oh my gosh, I wanted to go offer to make him dinner or something because I'm like, this man's just trying to survive. And I remember my grandpa was the same way, but people get old and we don't, like you're saying, we don't have enough connections with humanity and then nobody's there to help them. But that's a
And
whole
it,
nother episode.
yeah, but I mean, that goes to this idea that there's no shortage of opportunity to engage with others. And when you do, and I say this to some people, I said, I feel guilty sometimes by how happy I am. And I said, I feel like I wake up just happy. And I dialed it into, I'm like, it's because of people. And I can't encourage people enough. Like this, our conversation, yes, it started about trafficking and it's kind of migrated into this, this foundational belief is like what I've gotten out of it, right? I didn't get into this to get anything out of it. I got into this because I believe people have value and worth and need to be understanding and feel that. But what I got out of it is I wake up every day just incredibly happy, content, satisfied.
Mm.
And I didn't pursue stuff and I pursued people and I encourage people in that. That's where you will find purpose. That's where you'll find wholeness. And there's no shortage, to your point, no shortage of need out there. And when we go to approach people in need, I'd ask the question, have you ever done anything stupid in your life at all? Have you?
The intro to this podcast.
Okay, there you go. Perfect example, right? And I think about, we all can say that we have, like when I was 13, I was in Ukraine and we bought a new house. It was an old house, but we were new to it and it didn't have any indoor plumbing. And so there was an outhouse out back. I was a 13-year-old boy, for whatever reason, curiosity got the best of me. We put a new bathroom in the house. I wanted to go see what was in the outhouse. A couple of weeks later, I decided to look down. It's dark. I'm like, okay, how do I lighten this up? And as a 13-year-old boy, I thought it was a good idea to pour gasoline and while looking down the hole, strike a match and drop it in. And everything literally blew up into my face. And so I went inside. I remember my dad, this haircut came, no, it came different time. But I walked away unhurt. But I always think, like, if you were there with me and you saw me do this, see me pour gasoline down an outhouse hole and then strike a match, which number one, didn't need gasoline to help it. But I lit a match and dropped in it and it blew up in my face. And what if it repeated and I lost my sight? You'd have every reason to be like, dang, you did something stupid. You got what you deserve. But I always think, I reflect on it, like I walked away unscathed, unharmed.
Yeah.
And so for whatever reason, I was shown grace and mercy. And so when we talk about serving others, and this is kind of the core, the foundation of worthwhile, we serve others because we all have been shown grace and mercy at some point in our life. And so we should do the same for others
Mhm.
and approach it with that humility, with
Mhm.
that grace, with that mercy, with that patience. And as hard as it is in the moment of giving to other people and not getting back, not getting a thank you even, I promise you, you later will wake up and say, why am I so freaking happy? And it's because you made those hard decisions, those choices. And you recognize that even idiots like me that have blown up toilets in their faces can make a difference when we prioritize people.
I've never tried to blow up a toilet, but yes, I think we've all done some pretty stupid things. I can't even think of the dumbest thing I've done. And anywho, I- to wrap this up, I do want to ask you one last question, and then you can share all the information where people can find you, help out, connect, and that sort of thing. But is there a story that really sticks out in your mind as far as a story that really made you see humanity in a different light?
Yeah. I mean, there's one that I think of, this one girl. I was in our outreach program, Worth It. Her name was Joy. And we were sharing, like, we were going over what trafficking was. And in the midst of this, and this kind of goes back to like healing happens with people. And a lot of times, again, trauma isolates. Trauma makes you think that you're at fault, you're the only one. And so we're in this room at Worth It with all these women that have experienced sexual abuse, sexual exploitation, trafficking, physical abuse, being torn down verbally. And then she kind of just feeling safe said, this is what happened to me. She started to unpack her story of how she'd been trafficked and sold for years. And then she went a little further and said, I shared this story once at AA, Alcoholics Anonymous. And when I shared what happened to me, they all called me the whore and the slut. And so she says, I never shared that story for 12 years. For the first time, I feel safe. And so for me, that was something really groundbreaking to see how one of the programs that we're offering is helping individuals come together in their hurt
Mhm.
and leave healed. And after she shared her story, another woman started to share her story and started to share how she was sexually abused at 8 years old. And that led into her being exploited later and being trafficked. And then she shares that. And then she finishes with, I've never shared that story before. And she was 45 years old. And so what I feel is so profound is that what we feel like, we can't, maybe we feel like, maybe your listeners feel like we can't heal, like, because I'm too broken.
Mhm.
I'm too alone. I'm the only one. And I just want to encourage everybody listening, like, you are not alone. You are worth it. You are valuable. And healing does happen. And I've seen it time and time and time again with so many individuals that I felt like, we can't help you. And I was wrong. And so know that change can happen. Know that we can change this mindset of go out and get whatever you want. Maybe even those that are listening have had that mindset or are guilty of that. Like, I will go after something even at the expense of a person. And we need to shift that. And we need to see value in people. And that's where these individuals that we're working with, we're seeing that change happen, that healing happen because other people are investing in them. And again, you, with the title of your podcast, Hitting on the Head, this is a soul change. It's where you get woken up, you get understanding that something more is at play here.
Mhm.
When you look in the mirror, what you see is not all that there is. It's not just yourself. There's
Mhm.
a whole bigger world that's at play, and you can make a difference in it if you prioritize that over yourself.
Yeah. Thank you so much for being here, Dan. All these stories are just remarkable stories, and I think this is a lot of very valuable information. I feel like we could go on and on and on. Um, where can people connect with you or find you, or what can people do? Can people get involved with your organization?
Yeah.
Yeah.
There's a variety of ways. So a lot of our work that we do here is in the Philadelphia area where we do our outreach program and our housing program.
Okay.
We also have stores, worthwhile thrift stores, which we have that as a partner network. So we can offer setting stores up in other parts of the country. But for the broader audience, one of the things that we do is we have an outreach program that I mentioned, Words of Worth, where we go into schools and we send an artist there. We have a kind of resident artist that will go out and he'll stay there for about 2 weeks and paints this beautiful mural that has a central flower that has 6 petals. And in the center of that flower, it says, you are. And then each petal says, you are worthwhile, you are heard, you are seen, you are enough, you're unique, you're loved.
Mhm.
And that's for students. And so we encourage your audience, like if they have a school that's like, hey, we want to have the Words of Worth mural in our school, because that then we do an assembly, we talk to youth. So that's one way you can get involved that way and spread that word. Another we have coming up from May 1st to July 30th, and July 30th is World Day Against Trafficking. We do this every year. We do a national ACT challenge. And it's called the ACT challenge because when people learn about trafficking, they want to act, they want to respond.
Mm.
And so what we do is it's like an awareness campaign slash fundraiser, but flip backwards in the sense that we don't ask your audience to fundraise. We actually get the sponsorships. We get pledges from corporate donors that say, we'll pledge, $10,000, $20,000. And then the audience can go out and walk or run or bike or swim. And every mile they unlock is $1 donated towards housing, towards education, counseling, programming, employment, all those services that we offer through Worthwhile. And that runs May 1st to July 30th. People can get involved and log their miles. They go to worthwhile.org and there's information there to be part of it. And what I love about it is it raises a ton of awareness. Last year, we had an impact of 6.2 million people. This year, we're targeting about 6.8 million people. And so that awareness helps people understand that, number one, this is an issue, or those at risk to be like, I am at risk and I can find help. And
Mhm.
so if we can raise enough awareness in schools and in our communities through the Words of Worth program or the ACT challenge, we can lessen the impact of trafficking and we can help
Mhm.
people that are in a vulnerable position be safe. And so that's how people can get involved. We want you to know that you can get involved and join. I don't know how many nonprofits you have on your podcast, but being a nonprofit, people are able to contribute financially as well. And that goes right to our programs. We are self-funded, meaning our organization, we generate revenue through our stores so that our admin, our marketing, all those things are covered. But when you give financially, it goes directly to those programs, goes directly to the housing, to the outreach program, to the school programs. So that's a way that people can get involved as well.
Okay. Where do people go to make a donation?
they can go to our website, worthwhile.org. That's the easiest way. And there's a lot of information. There's a donate button there. And again, just kind of keying in on this whole talk, the name Worthwhile. I mean, we call that the organization that because that's what essentially we want every person to understand is that they are worthwhile.
Yeah. I love that. Thank you so much. Again, I really appreciate it. And I feel like you're just God bless you. I feel like I have to say, because this is just, it's something that humanity absolutely needs. And some of us are not contributing as much as we could, including myself. So,
Well, maybe this podcast will be that turning point, right? Maybe it'll awaken their soul.
yeah, perfect.
But thank you. Thank you
Thank
for
you.
this opportunity. It was great. And I love that you and I both are human. We both make mess ups and it still can be beautiful.
Yeah, I'm not sure what I'm going to do with the intro here.
I say leave it.
I know, but then I'm like, people are going to just turn it off and be like, oh my God, this is too crazy.
Uh, either way, I think you might do the opposite. They'll be like, I got it. Here how they're going to be helping traffickers.
Yeah, every trafficker is going to listen and be like, yes, this is mine. No.
On
Yeah.
that note, yeah.
And on that note, I'm going to hit end.